horary is an excellent tool in order to uncover things about any house, basically, but house 12 especially, because house 12 has a peculiarity that is to remain hidden, right? So it's in the nature of house 12 to stay in the background of our attention or consciousness. For those who have an interest in uncovering things about the psyche, horary can be an incredible tool to bring those things to light. This is a Aquarian who had a falling out with one of his acquaintances. He expressed something to her she didn't like, and she kicked him out of her Facebook group. But he respects her professionally very much. Years later, he asked, should I go and apologize and ask her for forgiveness? Will she be receptive and welcome me back into her life, so to speak? Not necessarily in the group, in the Facebook group. He just wanted to reconnect with her. And he wants to know if she would be receptive and take him back. So let's take a look here. He is signified by Mercury and the moon, right? So here's his thinking mind, and here's his feeling mind. And she is signified by Jupiter. What do you see here on the ascendant? Can you recognize the presence of a star here, a fixed star? Aldebaran is a star connected with beginnings. And here we have somebody who broke up with another person in the past, and he's considering rekindle his relationship, right? So it's the new beginning. And Aldebaran gives that picture. He is Mercury, and he's conjunct the Sun, and he is in house 12. Can you tell me one thing about this configuration? Anything you can see about these three things? Mercury in this particular place in Taurus, Mercury near the Sun, and being in house 12. He's not thinking clearly. Yes, very clearly. And there are two testimonies. He's not thinking clearly, and he's not seeing the situation. Mercury is conjunct the star Algol. That's one of the big stars that you have to know. Whenever a significator or a cusp is on Algol, okay, it's a red flag. This person is not thinking straight. That's the best way of putting it. If you look, there's an article on my website. Keep that list handy. And Algol is a very strong testimony. Sometimes you can judge a chart just by looking at that. So whatever Mercury is thinking of doing, he's not thinking straight. Plus he's combust, so he's blinded, right? This already answers the question, but let's see, there's more in the chart. Losing his head, exactly. That's the idea of Algol. So it's usually connected, not necessarily always, but usually it's connected with mind activity, the thing you're considering, the thing you want, whatever you're thinking about, you're not thinking appropriately about it. So it's wrong thinking. And it's connected to making decisions. So there's the risk of making the wrong decisions. Here he's in house 12. So it already tells us that whatever he's trying to do is probably going to go against himself, right? He's in house 12. And look at where the ruler of house 12 is. He is in house 12, and his Lord 12 is in his house. So his house 12 is part of the reason he wants to talk to her, okay? He asked this question, so the chart shows all the things that influence his decision to make this connection with her. So what about his own house 12 could be that influences his decision to connect with her? Why does he want to connect with her? Is it his respect for her as a professional, or is it something else? What does he want from her? So he wants to connect with her, he must want something. What does he want? Can you see anything in the chart that tells us what he wants? Well, he's asking for forgiveness, right? So that's part of it. We know what Mercury tells us already, right? Well, what does the moon tell us? Look at the moon location, look at the moon's antician. Do we use the 5-degree rule? The moon is in the 8th. Absolutely, yes. We always use the 5-degree rule. And if it's a big house, it can be more than 5 degrees. If this house here was very big, it could be even more than 5. Okay, it's house 8. But house 8 is not part of this chart, has nothing related to that, to house 8. However, house 8 is the turned house 2. Yes, there's something about his unconscious programming, his grief, and his house 12. As we can see, his ruler of house 12 is here. So whatever thing programmed his house 12, whatever trauma he had in the past, that connects to this type of situation is coming to the surface here. So this event with her is triggering his house 12 that's coming up in this situation. So I'll give you a hint here. This chart is about the same quadrant from the previous chart. Okay? So we know already what kind of devils he has. Okay? So the trauma that he developed back then, when he fell in love with the girl, created this feeling of inadequacy in his life and the fear of being judged by other people. Conversely, what you develop in terms of your ego is a desire that people look at you in a positive way. So the desire to receive forgiveness or be accepted is part of how his ego behaves. And as we can see, he's not in the sign of Jupiter, so he doesn't care for her. Okay? The moon is in the fall of Jupiter. He doesn't care for her. So this is not about her. He cares about Saturn. The woman triggered him. Yeah, absolutely. This chart is entirely about what triggered him. It triggered both in the past, when he expressed what he expressed. We're not analyzing that. It may or may not have triggered that. But the desire that he has to reconnect with her triggers his house 12. So the reason why he wants to reconnect with her is to receive her approval or her forgiveness. It doesn't matter how you paint it or name it. What he wants her attention, and he wants her attention to be positive. He wants her to treat him nicely. Okay? So the moon emotionally, and remember that the problem that he has in his ego is an emotional one. He wants to feel that he's adequate, the way you feel adequate in terms of house 12, right? If you're a healthy, sane, psychologically sane person, you feel adequate naturally, because inadequacy, you deal with that in the moment. If you know how to do something and you cannot do it, you're inadequate. But that's a healthy inadequacy. Here, it's imaginary. So he has this programmed emotional inadequacy in him. And now that's expressing in this desire to connect with her. He wants to be accepted and liked by her. And therefore, he wants to connect. And the fact that he is on his second cusp, this is the second cusp from her. So the 8th house has no importance here. But the second from the 7th is important, because this is the house of your self-esteem and the house of the things you express, right? You express to yourself or you express to other people. It's how you show yourself, you present yourself to other people. And this is the house of what she expresses to him. So he wants her esteem. It's emotionally, he wants Saturn. Look at the moon. The moon is in detriment in Capricorn. So he feels pretty bad. Yes, he's very unstable, he's feeling bad about himself, okay, which is kind of a snapshot of self-deprecation, right? You hate yourself. Remember that the detriment, one of the ways you can interpret detriment, when a planet is in detriment of another planet, you hate that planet. When you're in the sign of that planet, you love that planet. So, and a planet in its own detriment is self-hating, right? So this is a picture of self-deprecation. Self-deprecation, you put yourself down, right? So being in one's own fall or in one's own detriment is a picture of that particular psychological quality of self-deprecation. You hate yourself. So here's a picture of somebody who hates himself, and therefore he looks for attention from other people so that he can feel better, right? It's an addiction, right? You're addicted to other people's attention, which causes suffering. It's a bottomless pit, right? You'll never be happy. You're happy only when you receive other people's approval, and the rest of the time you suffer. And if the people reject the attention you want, you suffer even more. So it's a very sad situation, but that's how the ego behaves for a lot of people. And the chart is giving that message. So the chart is basically telling in advance, you're coming from the wrong place. But now let's see how she's going to respond to this. Because some people are forgiving and nice and they welcome other people back, right? Especially if they're sane. They can do that out of their own egos as well. There's a possibility. So let's see how she's going to behave if he asks for her forgiveness. The first thing to note here is that the moon's antecedent, 2 degrees of Capricorn, is at about 28 degrees of Sagittarius, right? So the moon is here and the moon is here, conjunct the south node. So here's a guy who's feeling bad about himself, asking for forgiveness, and whatever happens here is not going to make him feel expanding, right? Like the north node. It's going to be the opposite. It's going to constrict him even further. So this is the first testimony here that the thing he's considering is going to backfire. Very Algol, right? What he's thinking of is not a good idea. And here's the first indication we have. The moon is not going to get happier. If the moon was at 29 degrees of Capricorn and it was going to get out of its detriment, it would mean, oh, there's an improvement for the moon. The moon is going to get out of its detriment. That would be a positive testimony. Here, nothing like that is happening. And the moon doesn't see, it's a hidden thing. So it's going to be a surprise if he does that. How is she feeling about herself? And how does she feel about him? And Jupiter is in fall. She doesn't have a very high opinion of herself either. Maybe she even have a similar problem with her ego that triggers her as well. Maybe even the problem they had in the past when they fell out is connected with that. So here we have he's feeling bad about himself and she's feeling bad about herself. And look at the mutual reception. They're in mutual reception, but negative. So we saw earlier that he doesn't care about her. It's even the opposite. The moon, because the moon feels so bad, the moon is in the fall of Jupiter. So the moon puts her down, doesn't like her. And Jupiter is in the detriment of the moon. She hates him emotionally. It's even worse. Okay, so what can you expect here when he asks for forgiveness? How is she going to respond? Negatively, absolutely. So don't do what you're thinking of doing, okay? Don't let Algol take you into this situation. Don't do it. And thankfully, the chart has enough details to tell this querent why he's going to get into trouble. So this analysis of house 2 and house 12 here gives enough material to him to go into his house 12 consciously and begin to unravel or continue to unravel the things that create unnecessary suffering or imaginary suffering in his life, right? So if you want to contact her, find a good reason to it. Maybe there is another reason, professional reason or whatever, but this particular reason is not a good one. It's from ego. And if it's from ego, it's going to cause suffering. There's no, ego doesn't do anything positive. That's why it's called the house of self-undoing. So this will cause more self-undoing.